The signal from the edge. Commander Sarah Mitchell had been staring at the same star chart for 3 hours when the communications array lit up with an alert she had never seen before. The Deep Space Monitoring Station orbiting Neptune was quiet most nights, picking up nothing more interesting than cosmic radiation and the occasional merchant vessel passing through. Tonight was different. The signal came from beyond the established trade routes, from a region of space that most galactic citizens avoided. It was old technology, the kind that predated modern, faster-than-light communication by decades. Sarah leaned forward in her chair and called over her technical specialist. Lieutenant David Park hurried to her station and began running diagnostics on the incoming transmission. David told her the signal was repeating on a loop and had been broadcasting for at least 6 days before they picked it up. The encoding was ancient but recognizable. It was Thornian. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. The Thornians were a species that humanity had only encountered once, 50 years ago during the silent plague that nearly wiped out the colonies on Mars and Titan. When human medicine failed and millions were dying, it was a Thornian medical ship that appeared in Earth orbit. They shared their knowledge freely and asked for nothing in return. They saved humanity and then disappeared back into deep space. Sarah ordered David to clean up the signal and translate it. The computers worked for several minutes before producing a result. When the audio played through the speakers, Sarah heard something that made her blood run cold. The voice was calm but carried an undertone of desperate resignation. The Thornians were dying. Their worlds were under attack by something called the Krill Swarm. Their defenses had fallen. Their fleet was destroyed. They were broadcasting this message to anyone who might hear it, hoping someone would remember them and perhaps tell their story to the galaxy. Sarah immediately opened a priority channel to Earth Command. She knew that Admiral James Holland would still be awake in Geneva. It was early morning there, and James was known for starting his day before sunrise. When his face appeared on her screen, she could see he was already in uniform and holding a cup of coffee. Sarah transmitted the Thornian signal to him and waited while he listened to the entire message. James set down his coffee cup and asked her to replay the message. She did. He sat in silence for a long moment before speaking. He told her to maintain monitoring of that sector and to alert him immediately if anything changed. He said he would convene an emergency session of the Defense Council within the hour. Sarah acknowledged the orders and closed the channel. The next 6 hours were a blur of activity. Sarah coordinated with other deep space stations to triangulate the exact location of the Thornian signal. She compiled every piece of data they had about the Krill Swarm, which was not much. The Krill were known to the galactic community but were rarely discussed. They were an insectoid species that operated as a collective hive mind. They consumed resources from planets and moved on, leaving dead worlds behind. Most civilizations simply avoided the regions where the Krill were active. On Earth, the Defense Council met in a secure facility beneath the Swiss mountains. Admiral James Holland presented the Thornian distress signal to representatives from every major nation and military branch. The room was filled with the most powerful people in human space, and they all listened to the message in complete silence. When it finished, the debate began immediately. General Patricia Torres from the America's Defensive Force argued that humanity had an obligation to help. She reminded everyone that the Thornians saved millions of human lives during the silent plague. She said that humanity had a debt to repay. Defense Minister Chen Wei from the Asian Coalition agreed. He pointed out that if humanity wanted to be taken seriously in the galactic community, they needed to show they were willing to stand up for their friends. However, not everyone agreed. Secretary General Anton Volkov from the European Security Directorate urged caution. He pointed out that humanity still had a relatively small fleet compared to the established galactic powers. Sending ships to fight the Krill could leave Earth and the colonies vulnerable. He argued that humanity needed to think about their own survival first. Admiral Rebecca Stone from the Colonial Defense Network supported this view. She said that humanity could not afford to lose ships and personnel in a conflict that might already be over. James Holland listened to all the arguments before speaking.
He reminded the Council that 50 years ago, the Thornians came to help humanity when no one else would. The Galactic Council had refused to intervene during the Silent Plague, claiming it was a human problem to solve. The Thornians came anyway. They shared their medical technology and asked for nothing in return. Because of them, Mars and Titan survived. Because of them, millions of children grew up with parents who would have died. James argued that humanity had a choice to make. They could be the kind of species that only helped when it was convenient and safe, or they could be the kind that stood by their friends no matter the cost. He said that if humanity abandoned the Thornians now, they would lose something more valuable than ships or personnel. They would lose their honor. The room fell silent again. Finally, a vote was called. The decision was not unanimous, but it was clear. Humanity would respond to the Thornian distress call. Admiral Holland was given authority to assemble a fleet and dispatch it immediately. He chose the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, which had been conducting training exercises near Jupiter. The fleet consisted of 15 ships, including the heavy battle cruiser UNS Retribution, 4 destroyers, 6 frigates, 3 support vessels, and 1 medical ship. The total crew complement was just over 4,000 people. It was the largest military force humanity had ever sent beyond their own star system. Captain Marcus Webb commanded the Retribution. He was a veteran of the border wars against pirate factions and had a reputation for being both brilliant and unconventional in combat. When he received his orders, he was in the middle of a simulation exercise with his tactical officer. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres told him that they had incoming priority orders from Earth Command. Marcus read the orders twice and then called for all senior officers to report to the briefing room immediately. Within 10 minutes, his command staff had assembled. Marcus stood at the head of the table and explained the situation. He told them about the Thornian distress signal and about the krill swarm. He explained that humanity was sending them to provide military assistance to a species that once helped them. His chief engineer, Commander Paul Jackson, asked about the tactical capabilities of the krill. Marcus admitted that intelligence was limited. What they knew was troubling. The krill operated as a hive mind with perfect coordination. They attacked in overwhelming numbers. Their ships were biological constructs that could repair themselves. They were relentless and showed no interest in negotiation or surrender. His weapons officer, Lieutenant Daniel Kim, asked about their armament. Marcus brought up what little data they had. Krill ships used organic projectile weapons that fired acidic compounds and living organisms that could bore through hull plating. They also used swarm tactics, sending hundreds of small attack craft against larger vessels. Standard alien defenses were designed for energy weapons and struggled against the krill approach. Rachel pointed out that human ships were different. Human vessels were built tough because Earth was a harsh world with violent weather. Human hulls were thicker than most alien designs. Human weapons were kinetic railguns that fired solid metal at tremendous velocity. These weapons were considered primitive by galactic standards, but they were devastatingly effective against physical targets. Marcus agreed with her assessment. He said that humanity had some advantages that might surprise the krill. Human crews could tolerate higher acceleration than most species. Human pilots could execute maneuvers that would incapacitate or kill alien crews. Humans were also adaptable and creative under pressure. They did not give up easily. These traits have been honed on a deadly homeworld and in countless conflicts throughout human history. The briefing continued for 2 hours as the command staff reviewed everything they knew and planned for multiple scenarios. When they finished, Marcus dismissed everyone to prepare their departments. The entire fleet would depart within 12 hours. There was much to do. All across the 15 ships, crews worked frantically to prepare. Supply officers coordinated the loading of ammunition, spare parts, and provisions. Medical personnel prepared trauma bays and stocked supplies for treating both humans and aliens. Engineering teams ran diagnostics on every critical system. Weapons crews calibrated railguns and loaded magazines. In the crew quarters of the Retribution, the mood was tense but determined. These were professional soldiers who had trained for exactly this kind of mission. They talked quietly among themselves about what they might face. Some were nervous, others excited, but all of them understood the importance of what they were doing. Humanity was about to prove whether they deserved the reputation they had earned as Deathworlders. 12 hours later, the third expeditionary fleet formed up in space near Jupiter. The 15 ships aligned in formation with the Retribution at the center. Captain Marcus Webb sat in his command chair and reviewed the final checks from all departments. Everything was ready. He opened a fleet-wide channel and addressed all 4,000 personnel under his command. He told them they were embarking on a mission that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. He reminded them of the debt they owed to the Thornians. He told them that the galaxy would be watching to see what humanity was made of. He said he was proud to serve with each and every one of them. The fleet activated their faster-than-light drives simultaneously. Space bent and twisted around the ships as they entered jump space. They were heading towards the Thornian home system.
The stand at Thornia Prime, the third expeditionary fleet, dropped out of jump space at the edge of the Thornian home system and immediately went to battle stations. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the UNS Retribution and stared at the tactical display with growing horror. The system was a war zone. Debris from destroyed ships filled the orbital space around multiple planets. Energy signatures indicated active combat near the fourth planet, which was Thornia Prime, the Thornian homeworld. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres worked frantically at her tactical station and began cataloging what they were seeing. She reported at least 300 krill vessels in the inner system. The Thornian defense fleet had been reduced to fewer than 20 ships, and most of those were damaged. The orbital defense platforms around Thornia Prime were either destroyed or going dark one by one. Rachel's voice remained steady, but Marcus could hear the concern beneath her professional tone. The situation was far worse than anyone had anticipated. Marcus ordered the fleet to advance in defensive formation and to maintain communication silence except for tight beam transmissions between human ships. He wanted to get closer and assess the situation before the krill detected their presence. The 15 human vessels moved deeper into the system, using minimal power signatures. Marcus watched the tactical display and tried to understand the battle that was unfolding. The krill were attacking in waves. Hundreds of small attack craft swarmed around the remaining Thornian vessels like insects around dying animals. Larger krill bioships hung back and launched organic projectiles that exploded against Thornian shields. Commander Paul Jackson reported from engineering that all systems were operating at peak efficiency. The Retribution was ready for combat. Marcus acknowledged the report and continued watching the display. He needed to find a weakness in the krill formation. He needed to find a way to make a difference with only 15 ships against 300. Lieutenant Daniel Kim spoke up from the weapons station. He pointed out that the krill ships were concentrating their forces around Thornia Prime and ignoring the outer planets. The supply lines stretched back toward the edge of the system, where presumed reinforcements were arriving. Marcus saw the opportunity immediately. If they could cut off the krill reinforcements and disrupt their supply chain, they might be able to create enough chaos to give the Thornians a chance to regroup. He ordered Rachel to plot an intercept course for the krill reinforcement route. He told Daniel to prepare all railgun batteries for sustained fire. He opened a channel to the other ships in the fleet and transmitted his tactical plan. The human vessels would strike fast at the krill supply line and then withdraw before the main krill force could respond. It was a hit-and-run strategy that relied on human advantages in speed and maneuverability. The fleet changed course and accelerated toward the outer system. The Retribution led the formation, with the 4 destroyers spread out in a picket line. The frigates formed a second wave behind them. The support vessels and medical ship hung back at a safe distance. As they approached the krill reinforcement corridor, sensors began picking up individual ship signatures. Rachel counted at least 50 krill vessels moving in a loose convoy toward the inner system. These were supply ships and troop transports, not the heavily armed warships attacking Thornia Prime. Marcus gave the order to attack. The human fleet opened fire at maximum range. Railguns hurled solid metal slugs at a fraction of the speed of light. The kinetic projectiles crossed the distance in seconds and slammed into krill bioships with devastating effect. The organic hulls of the krill vessels were designed to absorb and dissipate energy weapon impacts, but they had no defense against solid matter traveling at relativistic speeds. The first volley destroyed 6 krill ships outright and crippled a dozen more. The krill convoy reacted immediately. The bioships began evasive maneuvers and returned fire with their organic projectile weapons.
Acidic compounds in living organisms streaked through space toward the human fleet. The human ships weaved and dodged with a grace that surprised the krill. Human crews could tolerate acceleration forces that would kill most species. The pilots pushed their vessels through maneuvers that seemed impossible. The krill projectiles missed their targets as the human ships danced through space. The second volley from the human railguns was even more devastating than the first. Daniel Kim had adjusted his targeting solutions based on krill movement patterns. The metal slugs found their marks with deadly precision. More krill ships exploded or broke apart. The convoy was in chaos. Marcus ordered the fleet to maintain fire and to continue advancing. He wanted to destroy as many supply ships as possible before the main krill force realized what was happening. The battle lasted only 8 minutes but felt like hours. By the time the human fleet broke off and withdrew, they had destroyed or disabled 43 krill vessels without losing a single human ship. A few ships had taken minor damage from near misses, but nothing critical. Marcus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before refocusing on the larger situation. The krill main force near Thornia Prime would have detected the attack by now. They would be responding. Rachel confirmed his suspicion moments later. She reported that approximately 100 krill warships were breaking off from the attack on Thornia Prime and heading toward the human fleet's position. Marcus had expected this. He ordered the fleet to fall back toward the fourth planet's third moon. Intelligence data suggested that moon had extensive debris fields from mining operations. The debris would provide cover and create opportunities for ambush tactics. The human fleet reached the moon and took up positions within the debris field. The chunks of rock and metal ranged from the size of small cars to the size of buildings. They would interfere with sensors and create physical barriers against krill weapons. Marcus positioned the Retribution and the destroyers at the center of the formation, with the frigates spread out among the larger debris. He wanted the krill to come to them and to fight on human terms. The krill warships arrived 30 minutes later. They came in fast and aggressive, clearly intending to overwhelm the human force with numbers. There were 107 krill bioships against 15 human vessels. The odds were not good, but Marcus had faced worse situations during the border wars. He waited until the krill were committed to their attack run and then gave the order to fire. The debris field lit up with railgun fire from multiple angles. The krill had expected to find the human ships clustered together. Instead, they found themselves in a crossfire with enemies on all sides. The krill bioships were powerful and well-armed, but they struggled in the debris field. Their organic sensors were confused by the metal and rock floating in space. Their projectile weapons struck debris instead of human ships. Meanwhile, the human railguns fired with mechanical precision. Each shot was calculated by combat computers and refined by human intuition. The combination was lethal. Krill ships died by the dozen as the human fleet executed the ambush perfectly. But the krill adapted quickly. They were a hive mind and could coordinate their actions with perfect synchronization. They began using their numbers to surround individual human ships and overwhelm their defenses. The destroyer, UNS Defiant, found itself cut off from the rest of the fleet and surrounded by 20 krill bioships. Captain Elena Rodriguez fought brilliantly, spinning her vessel through impossible maneuvers and firing continuously, but the odds were too great. The Defiant's shields began to fail under sustained fire. Marcus saw what was happening and made a decision. He ordered the Retribution to break formation and move to support the Defiant. Rachel protested that it would expose them to enemy fire, but Marcus overrode her objection. The Retribution surged forward through the debris field at maximum acceleration. The crew was pressed back into their seats as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate for the extreme forces. Marcus gritted his teeth and held on as his ship raced toward the embattled destroyer. The Retribution emerged from behind a massive asteroid and opened fire with every weapon it had. The battlecruiser's railguns were larger and more powerful than those on the destroyers. The heavy slugs tore through krill bioships like paper. 6 krill vessels were destroyed in the first 10 seconds of fire. The remaining krill ships broke off their attack on the Defiant and turned to face this new threat. Marcus used the moment to position the Retribution between the Defiant and the enemy. He told Elena to get her ship to safety while he held the line. The krill concentrated their fire on the Retribution. Organic projectiles and acidic compounds hammered against the battlecruiser's shields. Alarms sounded across the bridge as shield strength dropped rapidly. Paul Jackson reported from engineering that they were taking heavy damage, but the hull was holding. Human ships were built tough, and the Retribution's armor was specifically designed to withstand punishment. Marcus kept firing. Every shot counted. Every Krill ship they destroyed was one less threat to his fleet and to the Thornians. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres was monitoring the entire battle from her tactical station. She suddenly called out with excitement in her voice. She had found something important. She told Marcus that she had been analyzing Krill movement patterns and communication signals. The Krill operated as a hive mind, which meant they had to maintain constant communication between their ships. That communication created a detectable pattern. Rachel had identified what appeared to be command nodes within the Krill fleet. These were ships that coordinated groups of other vessels. If they could destroy the command nodes, they might disrupt Krill coordination significantly. Marcus immediately saw the implications. He asked Rachel to identify the nearest command node. She pointed to a large bioship approximately 40 kilometers away that was hanging back from the direct combat. He ordered all destroyers to focus fire on that target. The human ships coordinated their attack and unleashed a devastating barrage. The Krill command node was struck by dozens of railgun slugs simultaneously. The bioship shuddered and then exploded in a spectacular fashion that sent organic debris flying in all directions. The effect on the Krill fleet was immediate and dramatic. The ships that had been coordinated by that command node suddenly became confused. They stopped moving in perfect synchronization and began making individual decisions. Some ships continued attacking, others retreated, and a few even fired on each other in the confusion. The human fleet pressed their advantage. They identified and destroyed 2 more command nodes in quick succession. The Krill fleet descended into complete chaos. Marcus ordered the fleet to push forward and drive the Krill away from the debris field. The human ships advanced in formation, firing continuously. The Krill were still numerous, but they had lost their greatest advantage. Without perfect coordination, they were vulnerable.